On the morning of May the 23rd, 1934, there were 6 members of the Barrow gang still breathing, and every single one of them were either behind bars or hiding out when the news came down that Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow had been shot to death on a road outside of Gibson, Louisiana. This is what each one of those 6 people did and said when that news reached them, and what they became after. And the record on this is better than you think. The reactions survived in jailhouse quotes, prison files, and court records. In one case, it's a patch of roadside dirt that 2 of them drove hundreds of miles just to stand on. Let's start with W.D. Jones, because his reaction is the only one in the whole outlaw record that got spoken out loud on the day it happened to actual reporters, and it was written down. Jones was sitting in the Dallas County Jail that morning. He was 18 years old and waiting to be tried as an accessory to murder that Clyde Barrow committed. His lawyers had set that deal up on purpose with Dallas County Sheriff Smoot Smith, who had been chasing the gang for years because Arkansas wanted to extradite Jones for a killing over there, and Jones believed Arkansas would put him in the ground. So when word came of the ambush, when that word hit Dallas, reporters crowded into the jail to get a reaction from the last gang member the public could actually reach. Jones gave them 6 words. He said, "I admit that I am relieved." Then he shook his head. "What type of shit is that? I admit that I am relieved? Come on, dude, you can do something better than that. That's like therefore I think, therefore I am, or some crap." Now, that word was no accident, though. He didn't say he was sad or they had it coming. The words he picked was relieved, and he earned it the hard way. Jones rode with Bonnie and Clyde for 8.5 months, and he later described Clyde as a man who would kill anybody in a hot instant. He said Clyde once threatened to kill him over changing a tire too slow. The worst boss you ever had never turned a performance review into a pistol, right? Jones also claimed Clyde used the killing of a grocery clerk named Doyle Johnson to make sure Jones would never dare walk away from the gang. So, as long as Clyde Barrow was alive, Jones was a witness who knew too much, sitting in a cell with his name in every paper. Now, on May the 23rd, that prom died on a Louisiana road. At his trial that October, every witness the state called recommended against the death penalty, and Jones took his 15 years of prison. Now, Raymond Hamilton and Joe Palmer got the news inside the same prison under the same sentence, and their reaction comes with the date and a time of day. And there's a set of official government minutes recording it. Both men were sitting in the Texas prison system death row house at Huntsville, condemned for the murder of a guard named Major Joseph Crowson during the January 1934 Eastham prison farm breakout. That breakout was Clyde Barrow's operation, staged to free Hamilton, and Palmer was the man who shot Crowson doing it. As Crowson lay dying, Lee Simmons reportedly made him a promise. Every person involved in that breakout would be hunted down and dispatched. They would be made unalive. Simmons ran the whole Texas prison system as its general manager, and it was Simmons who later commissioned Texas Ranger Frank Hamer to lead the pursuit that ended at Gibson. So when Bonnie and Clyde died on May the 23rd, Hamilton and Palmer were reading a news story. They weren't reading it too much. They were reading a progress report. The state had a list. The first 2 names just got checked off, and their names were further down on the same page. Hamilton's situation was stranger than Palmer's because Clyde Barrow died and also canceled a personal death threat against him. So Clyde threatened a lot of people, apparently. Hamilton had split from the gang in early 1934 over money and over how the gang threatened his girlfriend, Mary O'Dare. After he got captured that April, wearing the electric chair, he publicly blamed Clyde and the gang for an Oklahoma officer's murder, and he sent his lawyer a letter denying any involvement with Barrow, signed with his own inked fingerprint. Clyde answered by calling him a yellow rat and dictating a letter straight to Hamilton's jail cell that said, "I should have killed you." Well, I guess it's, short words. Sheriff Smoot Schmidt intercepted the letter and put it in the newspaper, so the whole state of Texas knew Clyde Barrow wanted Raymond Hamilton dead. That makes a whole lot of people included, though. Then May the 23rd came, and the man who wrote that letter stopped breathing, which left the state of Texas as the only party still holding the claim against Raymond Hamilton's life. And that's not a comforting thought when the state's already scheduled your chair date. The two condemned men gave the state their answer on July the 22nd, 1934, at about 4:20 in the afternoon, 60 days after the ambush. Hamilton, Palmer, and a third convict named Blackie Thompson went over the Huntsville wall using pistols smuggled in through a bribed guard. Breakout was put together by an inmate named Charlie Frazier, and another escapee named Whitney Walker got shot to death by a guard at the wall. The Texas Prison Board's own minutes from July the 24th, 1934 recorded the whole thing. Both men ran for months. Palmer got recaptured in Kentucky on August 13th, 1934. Hamilton stayed loose until early April 1935 when they caught him at a rail yard in Fort Worth, Texas. Then, on May the 10th, 1935, Raymond Hamilton and Joe Palmer were put in this chair, and they put some wire to it and they turned it on. They call it electric chair. That was in Huntsville, one after the other on the same night. By spring of 1935, the state had kept Simmons' promise against every man from that breakout that it could reach. It couldn't reach Henry Methvin, and that's because Methvin is the one gang member whose reaction to Bonnie and Clyde's death happened before they died. Methvin was riding with them that spring, and he was in on the Eastham he was one of the Eastham escapees on Simmons' list. So he understood exactly what was coming for everybody in that car. So his family made a deal. In exchange for leniency for Henry, the Methvins handed the law the information that put the posse on the road in Bienville Parish that morning. And his father Avery took up a spot on the roadside that morning to help with the ambush, not by shooting, but by slowing them down. Henry Methvin reacted to their death by arranging to survival. He sold the two people driving him around to buy his own hide, which is the outlaw version of pushing your buddy at the bear. You ain't got to outrun the bear, you got to outrun the buddy. Texas kept its end and pardoned them for the Texas crimes, but Oklahoma never made any deals, and Oklahoma convicted him for the murder of a constable named Cal Camden at Commerce. He got paroled in 1942. What happened after that is all on the record. His daddy, Ivan, got killed by a hit-and-run driver in 1946. Then in 1948, Henry fell asleep drunk at a railroad tracks, and he got ran over by a train. He got cut in pieces. And folks have speculated ever since that he was pushed by someone looking for revenge. The one man Simmons' list couldn't touch spent 14 years dying anyway. Now, Ralph Fults was sitting in a Texas prison cell on May the 23rd, 1934. He had been locked up since 1932, before most of the gang's famous crimes ever happened. He left no recorded words about the ambush. What he left instead is stranger. Governor Miriam Ferguson pardoned Fults in January 1935, right before she left office. Within weeks, he teamed up with Raymond Hamilton, who was still loose from the death house escape, and two former Barrow gang members went back to work. They burglarized a National Guard armory in Beaumont and took 2 Thompson submachine guns. Then on March the 10th, 1935, they gave an interview to a Houston reporter named Harry McCormick about the inhumane conditions inside the Texas prison system. How about the inhumane conditions inside of a damn coffin, dude? And then they staged the whole thing as a kidnapping so McCormick wouldn't be charged with harboring them. It was pretty stupid. Now, that interview wasn't some random stunt. Exposing the Texas prison system had been Clyde Barrow's personal obsession. I thought it was shooting people. The Eastham raid was his revenge. Here were two of his men, 10 months after his death, using the freedom to put his grievance in a newspaper. They were running the dead man's errand. On March 22, 1935, driving through Louisiana, Hamilton and Fults stopped at the ambush site outside Gibson. That put two armed, hunted members of the Barrow gang back on the road where Frank Hamer's posse had waited. They stood on that spot, and then they drove on to Mississippi. Not much else you could do, right? That roadside stop is the closest thing to a funeral visit the record shows from anybody in the gang. Now, Blanche Barrow, her reaction is the quietest one. And to be honest with you about the limits of the record, she was in the Missouri State Penitentiary on May the 23rd, serving a 10-year prison sentence for her part in the Platte County shootout. And she was partially blinded from the glass that hit her in the face at Dexter Park the year before. Dexfield Park. No reporter wrote down her words when the news arrived, and whatever reaction she had stayed inside those walls. But the record does show that she did, or what she did with all those years after. She served her time and got released in 1939. After that, she went back to Dallas and remarried and lived a quiet, law-abiding life for nearly 50 years until she died in 1988. Late in her life, she gave her account to a historian named John Neal Phillips, and her memoir eventually got published as My Life with Bonnie and Clyde. Of the 6 gang members alive on May the 23rd, 1934, Blanche is the only one who never touched outlaw life again from that day forward. Bonnie and Clyde died in 22 seconds on a Wednesday morning. The gang they left behind spent anywhere from 1 year to 54 years reacting to it. Now, your reaction to this, hopefully, is to subscribe to the channel and hit that hype button. And don't forget to leave us a like, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Hidden Lens.